Alright, to those of you who are new here, hello and welcome. And to those of you who are coming back to the channel, it's good to see you again. Real quick, before we get started, I've decided that rather than awkwardly reiterate who I am at the start of each video, I'm going to streamline things a bit and use this as my new channel and video header. All of that old info that used to be here about who I am and what I do and the purpose of the videos in this playlist series will now be packed in the video description down below, along with the referral code that you see here on screen. If you're someone who doesn't have Star Citizen yet and you're thinking about getting into it, if you use my referral code on screen here when you create your account, you'll get some extra goodies, and depending on the time of year when you sign up, you may even get a free bonus ship with LTI in addition to the normal referral bonuses. Check Star Citizen's website for any info on sign-up bonus events that may or may not be running at the time that you go to create your account, as well as what ships may or may not be on offer for those sign-up bonuses. So, now that that's out of the way, let's get into today's video. Yeah. Yeah, probably. And in fairness, I did say that was part 1 of 2. So I'm not exactly done. It can get more complicated, but like even after part 2 of the video, you're probably still right. I feel like the guy at that board meeting and that meme that just like suggests something and then the other guy at the end of the table looks at him, just throws him out of the window. So, I mean, even after we add some added layers of complexity with part 2 here of the video, it would still probably make too much sense and actually solve their problems for CIG to even consider something like this, because no, you hit the nail on the head. They constantly want to refactor everything to death because they have no direction and no idea what they're doing, and they're just soaking a paycheck. So, but yeah, I blotted out your name because I don't know if you wanted to be mentioned, but you know who you are. That got a good chuckle out of me. Before I get in today's video about the expanding stuff, there's a couple things I gotta say. Like I said before, not a YouTuber, incredibly busy, and I'm gonna throw myself under the bus here, but like I make these videos and they are so hastily put together with such little amount of time to go through this stuff, and unlike, you know, what I do for my day job where I can go in and crack something open and edit something on the fly and just sweep a mistake under the rug, I can't do that here, because once the video is shot and it's uploaded, I would have to take it down, redo the entire thing. But like I said, I'm making these things at like all hours of the night, spread over different days. Like if you watch the time and date here for a couple of my videos, like the ones that I've just shot recently and this one even, you're gonna notice that there's like wildly different times for when I'm making these things. I'm pretty much only doing these when I have free time, which is intermittent at best. So I mean, it's so jank, and I noticed these spelling and grammar errors that are obvious as shit. And I sit there and just cringe and wince, and it's like, that's up there forever, but it's already done. Fuck it, it's out there. We'll just power through. So yeah, this is real low budget. I mean, like I said, it's pretty jank, and I'm just trying to get this stuff out. I don't do this for a living. I don't have much time to really compile these things. So yeah, I mean, it is what it is. But there was a couple things that I wanted to mention from the previous video too. Somebody said something about you obviously don't know what class of ship is, what class of ship like a C2 and what its role and stuff is, because I had it over here at like, yeah, because I had it over here listed under like the fast attack craft size things, and like that was just a general category for armor and how weapons should behave and interact with certain size ships. Like these over here would be like small and extra small, small, medium, large, extra large. I'm not calling a C2 or a Caterpillar. Actually, why isn't the Caterpillar up there? Yeah, the Caterpillar would probably be up there. I'm not calling a C2, a Caterpillar, a Hull B, stuff like that. I'm not calling them fast attack craft. Like, obviously a fucking mole is not a fast attack craft. This list right here had to do purely for armor category. Alright? The other thing is, when I said stuff like a Perseus or a like the Hornet and Gladiator would have like this heavy fighter class armor, I may not have like been really clear. It's implied that these things are heavily armored ships in lore, and while they are medium fighters and light bombers in the case of the Hornet and Gladiator built on like a medium fighter chassis, they would have class 4 armor. However, that has to do with like how thick and durable the armor is. Because they are still medium fighters and light bomber and stuff like that, they would still have medium fighter grade hit points, maybe a little more. So I don't know if I was super clear on that. And then one other thing that somebody else brought up was the arrow. So the arrow, they fuck off. Fuck off. The arrow, I said, was an outlier and it had abnormally heavy armor for a light fighter, blah, 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 blah. And then somebody's like, well, what's the source on that? And I'm like, actually, what is the source on that? Because this is just like an impression I had from forever ago. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, actually, where did I get the impression that an arrow had heavier armor for a light fighter? And I think what it comes down to, I don't know if it was ever actually said. I don't even know if this is the intention. I may even have been mistaken with this, but I think what it comes down to is the arrow was an anvil platform, and CIG removed one of the shield generators because it was overperforming and stuff back in the day. And Anvil is known for doing a lot of like really armored ships, just like Aegis is known for doing a lot of like really shielded ships. I think I got the impression that the Arrow was supposed to be a armored light fighter simply because it was an Anvil craft. Again, I don't know if it is or not, and if it is, it would probably have like medium fighter level armor, but with light fighter hit points. So you would need bigger guns to punch through it, or same size guns on like a light fighter frame would do slightly less damage. But again, that implies that CIG actually wants to turn the Arrow into an armored light fighter. I don't know if they are or not. That was like that could have just been a mistake on my part. So yeah, for the person who pointed that out, good catch. We'll just kind of delete this because I have no idea if that even is the case for the Arrow. If it is, cool. If not, it's whatever. And then there's one last thing before we get into the meat and potatoes of the video today, expanding upon the armor system and stuff. Oh yeah, that too. Forgot about that. And that is, I talked about different ways to do an armor system earlier in the previous video. All of that still applies, and I kind of had to do that video first, but again, I was really short on time, so I couldn't pack it all in the one video, so that's why this is part 2 of 2. And I had to get that out of the way before I moved into this one and expanded on it, because that was kind of the foundation of this. But I thought of something where I could actually show off what I meant earlier with making a general table, kind of like this here, versus just listing everything in there in like a state tree pool. And I have a modding program for Company of Heroes, which is something I used to mod forever ago and completely forgot about. So I'm gonna go into that and show you what I meant. So for example, right here we have we'll just use a Cromwell, and the Cromwell is classified as a vehicle. It's armored. It's a British vehicle. You see how you can like add these tags to it that describe to the engine like what is going on. So you can see right here, it's a medium tank. It is that's the racial vehicle. It's definitely a vehicle, armored, etc., etc. Well, you can go over here into the weapon, and we'll take like an Axis anti-tank gun, for example. And then target tables. So obviously you have like penetration, damage, and etc. And this is not like, I would not use Company of Heroes system. It works for Company of Heroes barely, but it's a real simple like weird system that is just not what I would. It's not appropriate for something like Star Citizen or a lot of RTS games, honestly. But you can add specific tuning to weapons. Like for example, here they don't want it to do much damage to infantry, and there's some target size things. I'd have to explain that, but that's beside the point. But here, if I wanted to add a new entity, and stuff, I could sit there and say, okay, what is it? Is it a vehicle? Or do I want this thing to be just good against medium tanks? You know, or do I want it to be good against a specific tank, like a Panzer IV or a Panzer II? Like, you can tune weapons to do exactly what you want, but then the state tree is going to get massive. So that is kind of why I'm going with like the category system, rather than sitting there and listing each individual entity. You know. That's what it is. Rather than listing each individual entity, because that would get nuts. And I'm not even sure if you could have a state tree that could support that amount of stuff without it just going crazy. Like, eventually you're gonna hit a limit. Well, this one's actually, limit is pretty high. But eventually you're going to hit a limit. Like, could you imagine if every single weapon was like this and you had to tune each individual? Like, that'd be a nightmare. So that's what I was talking about, was showing you guys, you know, every time you add something new, you have to add a new entity into every weapon in the game to interact with that. And then you would have to add... I mean, it's just, I can't even begin to describe the clusterfuck that this would be. So yeah, that's why I pointed out that yes, this would work, but it was a terrible, terrible idea. Simplify it, and just because it's more simple doesn't mean that it's a bad design. So with that out of the way, let's get into today's video where we actually make things more complex than the previous video. So. Okay, it's now yet another day as I piecemeal this stuff together, but let's just jump into it. So getting the ways I would not do an armor system and why out of the way first before I end the video with how I would do it and why. Somebody talked to me the other day and they asked me, what plans do you have for like armor degradation or sundering stuff? And I'm like, you mean aside from like wear and tear? And they said, no, I mean like shooting armor and degrading it. I was like, I don't, because that's basically just another HP system and pool that you have to chew through, which is kind of boring. And then secondly, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, it like at face value, I guess you could, like, some people, I can kind of understand how when you think about it, you go, say I have class 5 armor and a weapon capable of damaging class 5 armor whittles away at me but doesn't destroy the ship completely and breaks the armor facing, and now suddenly instead of having class 5 resistances, it's been degraded to its like lowest state, which would be like class 3, and now suddenly additional things that couldn't hurt me before are able to hurt me. I get how that sounds like it could be fun, but it does a couple things. One, it allows for things that shouldn't really be able to damage the ship in the first place to eventually be able to damage it, which is not very good for balance or intent around an armor system, because that's kind of like the whole reason is to keep out smaller guns. Secondly, it doesn't make a lot of sense from a realistic standpoint, because, for example, say you have a machine gun or a rifle, and say you're shooting at a tank. You can't shoot through the tank. Now say an A-10 comes in the real world and just strafes the crap out of the tank and disables or destroys it. Well, the armor in the tank is destroyed. But just because the A-10 came in with the bigger gun and destroyed this like APC or tank or whatever it is, doesn't mean that you can suddenly start shooting at the side of this damaged or destroyed tank with your rifle and actually penetrate it and then destroy it even more or blow it up. Like that doesn't make any sense. Unless you're running up and sticking the barrel through the hole, I mean, the armor is not really affected. So you're either going to meet and exceed an armor's a threshold for being able to block something, or you're not going to meet it, and you're not going to get through that armor. Now, I get it. A lot of people can overcomplicate the crap out of this, and they can talk about metallurgy and brittle and ductile failures and repeated impacts and stress and blah 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 blah. That only actually applies with primitive metallurgy, or when your weapon is like in a super narrow threshold that I can't even begin to like describe of not quite being enough to damage the armor, but still, or penetrate the armor on the first or second hit, but still being able to build up stress on the armor, which again is a very, very, very fine sliver on the scale of penning and not penning. It's almost like looking at the visible light spectrum crack versus the entire EM spectrum of radiation. Like the chances of you having a weapon in that little niche are so small. So that's kind of the reason why I wouldn't do something like that. Another thing I would not do is, because I do actually want to have a light, medium, heavy, and no armor system. Like, I actually want to have that. So if you have no armor, it would remove a lot of HP. You would not get any kind of resists. You would not get your armor class bonus, like what we talked about in the previous video. You would just be raw hit points. You also, like when your ship is destroyed, you get very little from being salvaged because there's not a lot on it. But at the same time, it's really cheap to repair. And the reason that I would do something like that is because it may have a niche application for high performance racing. And then you could also attach all kinds of other balancing things onto it, like say, oh, I'm lighter, I can go farther and get more fuel efficiency and quantum and exploration. So an exploration may also want to go with a light or no armor build. I mean, me personally, I probably wouldn't go with no armor. I'd go with light, just because having some of that stuff enabled is better than not. But I mean, that's just two applications and two use instances for that matter. Like racing and long-range exploration. And they don't have to attach those modifiers with like range and fuel efficiency, but that's one thing. It could also affect flight performance, you know? And that's another reason you might want to do it if you're a racer, because you want maximum flight performance. You don't care about taking hits, because it's not really about that. It's about getting every ounce of performance out of your craft. Now, when going into light, medium, and heavy armor versus no armor, I would balance stuff around the idea that everything in theory or in paper is designed around assuming that it has medium armor installed on it. Now, that doesn't mean that's what it's actually going to come with. Certain ships may ship with light armor, certain ships may ship with medium, and certain ships may ship with heavy. But for like a grounding standpoint, like a working metric just to get started and figure things out, I would operate on the assumption that every ship has medium armor for balance, and then just kind of work the numbers from there for what is and isn't appropriate. But what I would not do when messing with light, medium, and heavy armor, and this is what I said earlier, like I was going to go into how I wouldn't do something and then how I would. And this is the where I wouldn't do it part. For example, we have a Saber, and a Saber is a medium fighter. It has class 3 armor, and it's where it has medium armor mounted. I would not say that if you turn it into light armor, it goes down a class, or heavy armor, it goes up a class. Because that may be true with the Saber, but if you have a special armored ship, like one of those like weird lore niche ships, like for example a Hornet, again, assuming that it is an armored ship and we're balancing things based off of medium armor, a Hornet, even though it has medium fighter hit points, its medium armor wouldn't be class 3. Its medium armor would be class 4. So if you had that system and you mounted heavy armor, that would bump up the Hornet, which is still a medium fighter, to class 5. Now if you go into the weapons on how they can punch across, punch up slightly, and punch down, that then puts a light fighter mounting size 3 weapons out of reach of damaging a heavy armor Hornet. Now, of course, yes, the heavy armor Hornet would probably suffer heavily from flight performance and would never be able to, like, catch the light fighter. Light fighter could just leave. But at the same time, a medium fighter, even an armored one, like the Hornet, is, in my mind, at least, supposed to be susceptible to light fighters. It may take a while. It may be durable, certainly more durable than something like a Saber or like a Vandal Glaive or other like medium fighter. But if you do it in that way, that moves it to where it's no longer viable to be attacked in that situation. And there are other cases where that could happen if you used a system like that. So that's why I wouldn't say, okay, you know, medium armor is what we intend the ship to have in terms of class. Light armor is, you know, 1 down, heavy armor is 1 up. I would not do it that way. I would have everything else I talked about, though. I would have no armor, like I said, as an option that allows you to have maximum flight performance, minimum repair cost, just raw hit points, nothing else. It disables the resistance profiles. It disables the armor class system completely. You just go down to class 0. So you're just, again, raw hit points. I would have that. I would have light, medium, and heavy armor. I would still balance everything around the idea that medium armor is the metric that all ships are using as like a baseline. But what I would do instead is I would say, okay, light armor, and again, you can play with these numbers. I would say, okay, light armor has a threshold, medium armor has a threshold, and heavy armor has a threshold. And if you have heavy armor, you're going to be getting the most salvage if you knock out a ship with that, but it's also the most expensive armor to mount. It's the most expensive armor to repair. It really hurts your flight performance, obviously. I mean, the heavier the armor, the worse your flight performance is going to get. It really hurts your flight performance. So those are the cons. The pros of that would be, if I put light armor on, it would have like up to a 10% resistance threshold, and it would probably double my HP versus having no armor. If I had medium armor, it would have up to a 20% resistance threshold, and it would probably have like 4 times my my raw health. And then if heavy armor would be about 6 times the raw health, and the resistance threshold for that would go up to about 40%. Now, that is, and that brings me to the next thing, is resistance coatings. That's another thing I would allow players to be able to do. And then, like I said before, we're making this more complicated. It doesn't have to be that simple. So, resistance coatings, you could have as many of them as you wanted. You could have specific ones, like some sort of like Faraday cage coating or something that has resistance against distortion, or maybe even immunity in that specific instance, or some sort of like ablative armor that is resistant against caustic damage, or like a reflective coating that's resistant against heat and energy weapons, or some shock absorbing coating that's with high face hardening or something that's resistant against kinetics and explosive damage. I mean, you've got all kinds of options. Now, where the whole idea that light, medium, and heavy has like percentile thresholds comes in, is these are the highest caps that you could have for specific tuning. So if I had a specific thing like a reflective coating, and I had light armor, it would just be a generic thing that you apply to your armor after. There wouldn't be like 80 different variants and stuff like that for different ships. It would just be a generic, what kind of armor do I want for my ship? Is it light, medium, heavy, or none? I apply it to my ship and then say, okay, which resistance coating do I want? And then it applies that. Now, maybe you could mess with the cost, because the cost probably would be on a case-by-case basis. And all you'd really have to do is mess with the icon and stuff. But this is all stuff that would be tuned at the shipyard. You do not need to make 1,000 different items for this. I mean, it's just that's overcomplicating it and spreading it all over the game. Like, this is horrible. Just don't do that. But the idea is a single coating would be the strongest, but again, it's just covers a limited amount of total resistance profiles. I would have omni coatings, like for example, a civilian omni coating, and then maybe a military omni coating, and the military omni coating would be locked behind like a rep grind, and it would be probably twice as strong as a civilian omni coating, but still not nearly as strong as a single dedicated resist. So for example, if we're using light armor, the civilian coating would be like 4% resistance, but it's like 4% for everything except maybe distortion. And then the military coating would be, okay, it's more expensive, but it's 6% resistance for everything, and including distortion. So remember when I said light armor has a cap of 10%, so a specific, reflective or explosive plating or whatever, if I had one of those, that would be 10%, but it would only be for that thing. Now, Omni builds would probably be the way to go, but for the niche players that are going to go do certain things, I mean, you could still do niche builds. I feel like those are good numbers to play with. And then again, you can tune them however you want, but this is just kind of how I would do it and why. As for the medium versus heavy armor, well, again, like to take those same numbers and just double them. So now the specific coating is 20% instead of 10%. Now the civilian coding is 8% instead of 4%, and the military coding is 12% instead of, what was it, 6%. So, I mean, that's just kind of how I would do it. Production, me just interjecting real quick. Everything I'm talking about right now in the video has to do with this little thing right in here. So when I'm talking about like resistances and stuff and the codings, I'm talking about ways where players could modify and customize this stuff right in here. And this doesn't even have to be the entire list. And where it says IR and CR signature, you could even have stealth codings, you know, that help enhance your ship's cross-section suppression or IR suppression or whatever. You know, although IR would probably be more towards like engines and stuff like that. When I was talking about health and stuff, like again, say for example, we have a zero. No, it's a bad example. Perfect. So like we have a Gladius right here, right? Gladius has 2,500 health. If we say that medium armor gives you a 4 times multiplier, that means that your unarmored C0, like armor removed Gladius, would only have 625 health. Now, that would also mean that your mass would probably go down wildly, and your flight performance would be twitchy as shit. But for the people who actually like really need that, you would be able to get used to it and maximize your flight performance. But again, you would be tissue paper. Like absolute tissue paper. You think this is tissue paper, imagine having this. So completely unsuited for combat, and if you bump into things, you're probably going to be losing arms and stuff, and wings and tails and all that stuff. Now, multiply that by 2, there's your light armor right there. Not very much, but it would enable a light fighter to begin having their class 2... their class 2 armor profile, which would give resistance against size 2 weapons and heavy resistance against size 1 weapons. And then things smaller than size 1 wouldn't even be able to damage you. And then we just say that you put in heavy armor, and your heavy armor would be like 50% more health than the medium armor, but it doesn't seem like as big of a jump. It may seem at face value that you might want to do like an 8 times instead of a 6 times, but you gotta remember something. Your effective hit points is also going to be getting doubled, because if you are a 40% multiplier with this versus a 20% multiplier with only or I'll just show you. Oops. So, you know, that's like a light fighter with that damage multiplier. That's your EHP. So your EHP with those resists are pretty high versus a medium fighter with medium profile. I mean, it's almost double, as you can see. So it's more than 50%. So it seems like 50% more than medium armor at face value, but you do have to take into account the potential resistances that you could have. And this is like a best case scenario, but it is still something to think about. That's all I wanted to say. Alrighty, wrapping up. I know this video has been a long one and a huge word and math salad. And if you're still here, I appreciate you sticking with me this far. I know I promised to do the weapon video next before I got into the rest of the rant videos I wanted to do, as well as the couple videos where I'm actually hopeful for something or like a wish list type thing. So before I release the weapon video, I did shoot 2 quick little videos that I'm going to squeeze in there first, because they're already more or less done. The weapon video is probably going to be another long one like this, unfortunately, because I've got to explain a lot of things. But you know, maybe not. Maybe it's pretty straightforward. We'll see when I have time to actually do it. As for ground vehicle armor, I personally wouldn't do what I've talked about in these videos for the spaceships and aircraft. However, CIG has said that they want to have full customization with ground vehicles too, so I'm sure they'll overcomplicate it. You might as well just copy the system over there. I mean, if it's already in place, then it's super easy to port over. Me personally, what I would have done is I would have just on the developer side just been like, okay, I want this vehicle to have heavy armor and to perform like this, and this one to have light or medium or whatever, and call it good enough. But again, CIG wants full customization. I know this should technically be in the weapon rework, but I just kind of wanted to put it here anyway. The Animus missile launcher is freaking terrible, and this is kind of how I would redo the missile launcher. And the railgun's actually mostly fine. I just updated it there for the armor system, because it's a size 2 weapon, handheld. It's got good damage, good range, charge up, etc. All that stuff works fine. I would just say it has the special high pen rules. So it's not like a normal size 2 weapon. Instead, it's like an enhanced pen one, as you can see here. And then missiles come in... again, this is going to be in the weaponry work, but I made missiles come in like 2 flavors, more or less. You've got your standard regular missiles, and then you have your torpedoes / anti-tank missiles. So in the Animus missile launcher's case, it would be considered a size 1 missile, but the launcher itself is size 2 because of its physical size, and also because it's like a cluster or multi-shot missile. But that thing's in dire need of an overhaul or update, because it does almost no damage. And it's just bad. It's got like a 2K lock range. I can't even talk about how terrible that thing is. In fact, it's still using the ancient, old school way of missile locking. So if anyone ever wants to know what the old way of missile locking was, pick up an Animus and point it at something. You'll see what it used to be. But in terms of damage, the missile is considered a size 1. In terms of armored pen, it's considered an anti-tank missile. So, I mean, well, you can just read this in the back, like you see how it works. And then changing gears over to, let's see, here we go, armor. In order to define what the armor is for the infantry, we have to define some weapons and stuff. So size 1, 2, and 3, like this is the overlap with the ships. So this would be the same as ship and vehicle. I don't consider size 1 to be like a proper vehicle weapon unless you're considering like an HMG or AT rifle or like light weapon, because it's the smallest thing that you can stick on there. It's like, for example, say you had like a Humvee or a Little Bird helicopter or something like that. Like that would be your size 1 weapons. That's why they stick them on top of Star Citizen's equivalent of Jeeps and whatnot. So this is how I would break down and classify all of the infantry weapons and some ground emplacements and stuff that aren't actually in there yet. Remember when I said C0 in the previous armor video was just for making it so you can't punch things to death? Well, this is what you would use if you wanted to actually punch things to death, is C00. Like, that's truly unarmored. And then, as far as the armor goes, I always thought it was really weird that the light armor has the smallest carry capacity, but the heavy armor has the highest backpack carry capacity. Now, I'm not talking about, like, the grenades and ammo pouches. That is fine for heavy armor. It's specifically the backpack, because think about it. Heavy armor should, well, be heavy as hell. And the guy's running around carrying this thing, and then you put the biggest backpack possible on this guy on top of that? Come on. That doesn't make any sense. So what I would do is I would leave medium alone. I would leave all the customization slots alone, but I would take the light backpack and make it to where, or the small backpack. I would rename them, not light backpack, medium backpack, heavy backpack. I would rename them small, medium, and large. So I would make the large backpack that you currently have on heavy able to only be mounted onto the light guys. And then the small backpack, or the light one that they have now, I would make it to where you can only mount it on the heavy guys. Because these guys look like EOD, like bomb squad guys. So I don't know how you're going to be carrying all of your gear, this heavy armor, and a ton of stuff in a backpack. But getting into the armor real quick, so that like I made the classes match the weapons. You could go either way with this. I'm not 100% sold on this. I didn't have a ton of time to think it out. This is the general idea of how I would do it. The part that I'm not sold on is, do I sit there and say, okay, you reduce damage from the same size weapon, in this case, you know, pistols, knives, clubs, SMGs, shotgun pellets, non-lethals and stuff, and then no reduction from the next size up? Or do I say, okay, heavy reduction from this size, if I was wearing light, heavy reduction from light and small weapons, and then a small to medium reduction in the next size, and then nothing above it. I mean, I don't know how much wiggle room you wanna go with, because it gets a little complicated. But I've got the pros and cons here, as you can see, and you guys can just read this. I mean, this video is way too long as it is. And then here's the medium armor and how I would do it. So you can read that and pause it if you want. And then the heavy armor, you can read that and pause that if you want. But the reason I've highlighted these parts here is because when I'm saying, for example, with the light armor, only reduces damage when hitting parts covered by the armor plate, I'm talking about this stuff here. So this things that I've highlighted, these are all soft or weak points in the armor where you wouldn't have this this type of protection. So this would just be like your undersuit. So that's all you would get, your basic like flight suit or whatever you call it, protection. And obviously the heavier the armor as it goes up, these points get smaller and the armor plate itself becomes capable of blocking more. Now, as for the face shield, I don't think in Star Citizen they're using bulletproof glass, air quotes. I think they're using transparent aluminum armor, which is something we have in the real world now, and it's pretty friggin' awesome. So I don't know if I want to make the face shield a weak point, or like I have here, and then not in the heavier light, or if I want to say, okay, you get the same damage reduction as armor for each of the face shields, depending on class. That's kind of why I circled this one and then not the other two. I was like, I don't really know how I want to do that. Like I said, didn't have a ton of time to think this one through. This is kind of good enough as it is, but if it's a little too restrictive in terms of what can and can't be defended and protected against, then maybe open it up a little, like I said, and say, okay, for example, the light armor gives a and then just note, Jesus Christ, typing, how do I? Oh, freaking butterfingers. And then, you know, just no protection against anything larger than that. And then the medium would obviously be, you know, one size higher, and then the light, or not the light, sorry, and then the heavy would be one size higher than that again. You know, I mean, those are the two ways to do it. There is one other thing that CIG talked about a while ago that I kind of agree with, because, like, if you go with what I have written here, this is really powerful. And CIG said, oh, well, we don't want people running around in heavy armor constantly, so you gotta have some way to discourage that. And one of the things that they kicked around as an idea was, well, let's make it to where the heavy armor guys have to either change their armor or they can't operate vehicles or turrets, aside from just sitting there as in a seat as like a passenger or something like that. And that's a pretty good idea in my opinion. And I talked about this back when they were talking about like gun racks and suit cabinets and stuff. And we still to this day don't have suit cabinets. But you could still store the armor inside the generic storage of the vehicle for each player, and then they can just put it on when they need it. Obviously, suit racks would be better, because then you could like insure armors, and a lot of ground pounders would be really happy with that quality of life update, let me tell you. But generally speaking, I actually kind of agreed with them and thought that it was a good idea to restrict vehicle usage to light and medium and no armor, because, like, again, you have to do something to prevent this stuff from just being the omni-purpose armor, aside from making it cost a ton, lowering your speed, and consuming extra stamina. So adding that as a con, I think, would be a really good idea. And then another thing I would probably do is maybe heavy armor is locked behind a rep grind. I know some people are going to hate that, but, you know, I can see light and medium armor being sold to the civilian market, but this guy looks like he's like one step shy of being a Spartan. And then when they eventually come out with that Titan suit, absolutely lock that behind a rep grind. Okay, we finally made it to the end of the video. I think it started out pretty solid and was pretty good through the middle, but towards the end of it, the quality dropped off a little bit because I was just so desperate to get this thing out and go to sleep. I mean, I like I said, I do these things when I have free time, and I have very little free time throughout the week. This took almost a week and a half to make. I wish I was a YouTuber and had tons of time to actually sit here and work on these all day and make them good, but I'm not, and I don't. So, yeah, I mean, that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it, and I'm going to go sleep for I was going to say a week, but it's probably a month. I'm exhausted.